Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. Join Stewart Heath for down-to-earth conversations with top professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders who have a story to tell. Let's get rolling.
Hello, everyone. This is Stewart Heath, your host. I'm the founder and CEO of Harvard Grace Capital, and we're back with another episode of the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and I'm very excited to announce Doug Jones here with us today. He's agreed to take time out of his busy schedule and share his story with us. So, Doug, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for reaching out.
I'm always grateful for people who are willing to take time out and do this, and I think our audience really enjoys the business stories, which also involve life stories and things like that. So let's get into it. Doug, over the course of your career, is there a time that you would say was a game changer that put you on the path of where you are today versus where you thought you would be?
Well, for sure there was.
Maybe more than one.
And probably more than one at different times in my career. I graduated with my undergraduate degree in 1986, so I've been in this business going on 39 years come June. I'd been in the business about 2 years. Started out up in the Boston area. I actually, interestingly enough, managing condominium associations is my first exposure to the real estate business. And I went back to school to get my MBA. So I'd been working full-time for 2 years, decided to take a step back, still worked part-time in the property management, residential real estate business, but went back to get my MBA. And I got it in marketing, so an MBA in marketing. And I was going to be the next great consumer products brand manager. I was going to be that guy. Procter and Gamble or Gillette or any of the Lever Brothers at the time, any of those, and I was going to set the world on fire, and I was going to change the world. And came out with my MBA degree. I'm 24, 25 years old. I have 2 years of work experience, not at all in the consumer products business or marketing or advertising or anything else. And I was shocked that I couldn't get a job here in 1989, 1990, that I was unable to get to get a job in that business. And I remember I had my dad had worked for Gillette when he first got out of the Marine Corps, and he had had a number of jobs since then, but always kept in touch with his folks at Gillette. I think that was probably one of his, except when he owned his own business, probably his favorite job. And we lived outside Boston at the time, and he took the commuter train into the World Shaving Headquarters, as they used to call it, right there in Fort Point Channel. And as he referred to it to the day he died. And so he knew a lot of friends, and he said, "Well, Doug, why don't you do this? I'll set up a lunch for you with somebody at the time who was a senior vice president with Gillette." And remember, he set up a very nice lunch. He joined me, which was odd at the time, for a 25-year-old. We had lunch with his father on, what I thought was a job interview, but it was a lunch for a couple of little friends to catch up and to talk to me. And it was very nice. It was a lovely restaurant. It was called Top of the Hub at the top of the Prudential Center in Boston on the 60th floor. Thought it was the fanciest thing I'd ever done. And having a nice lunch, and he said, "Doug, tell me, you want to be in marketing and brand management? Define marketing for me." And I looked at him, and you would have thought he asked me to split the atom. Define marketing. I had my MBA in marketing. I could tell you everything about Gillette and everything else, but I wasn't expecting what should have been the basic and most easiest block and tackling question that I would be asked. And I fumbled through an answer that I knew was bad at the time. My father knew was bad. The gentleman who was gracious enough to have lunch with us knew it was bad. And I walked out and I rethought about, okay, I don't have any experience in this business. I have a degree, which really means, it's a good degree. I'm going to have my MBA. I learned a lot, but that's not going to get me in the door. It's not going to get me where I want to go. I don't have the experience. And quite frankly, they're probably not looking to bring on someone at this point, not later, but 3 or 4 years into my career, no experience. I wasn't probably willing to start at the very bottom like I would have, 3 or 4 years earlier coming out of undergraduate school. And so I thought, well, real estate's been working well for me. And So I decided to branch out and not go back into real estate, but not the residential side. I was going to work in the commercial side and work with office buildings and retail space, and rather than have it be me dealing with people's homes, me dealing with people's businesses, thinking that would be a a more business-like and whatever you want to call it arrangement. And so the second epiphany was I got a job with a fantastic firm just north of Boston, incredibly successful, still in the business this day. One of the highlights and one of the highest rated and most thought of commercial real estate firms in Boston. Owners, commercial real estate owners. So we were doing the leasing and stuff, sort of in-house. And I joined them, and I got to work 5 minutes to 8 on my first day, and by 10 past 8, I knew I had made a mistake. Not because it was just the wrong fit for me. And commercial real estate, this company, despite its great success, was not right for me. And people have always asked what was the single defining moment in your career? And I oftentimes say this because I stuck with the job for 6 months or so. So it was clear on both sides it wasn't working. It wasn't where I belonged. But I said, look, when your gut tells you something, when in your heart and soul it's a mistake, have the strength, the intestinal fortitude, the backbone, the whatever you want to call it, to recognize it and deal with it head on right away. And I didn't do it. I suffered through 6 months of it. And I leased space and I managed space, and I was, you could have said I was successful, but I was unhappy. They were unhappy with me.
What did you not like about it?
It's interesting. It was just the culture. The culture was not entrepreneurial. It was if you were the chief operating officer or you were the owner, but if you were a if you were a leasing officer, it was, it wasn't just right and left guardrails. It was just right and left pinch points. You can't do it. Here's what it is. Here's what you'll do. Here's what you'll get for the space. Here's how you market it. The answer is no every time the prospective client or tenant comes back and says, hey, can we do this? The answer is no. This is our lease. And again, they're hugely successful. So I can in no way fault the way they're doing business, because they've been around now for 30 years, 40 years, 50, incredibly successful. But it just wasn't right for me. It was, and I don't consider myself the most entrepreneurial person. I was in too much of a box there, and it wasn't a fit for me. It wasn't a fit for what I either felt was my creativity or my ability to learn or my ability to perform or deliver or contribute. And so it was okay. It was wrong. And I said, after about 6 months, I left and was fortunate enough to join a company I was with for almost 21 years. And that really began an upward progressive journey of increasing responsibilities, increasing accountability, increasing scope of and breadth of work and such. That was really kind of set me on my path that said this probably is whether this industry wants me or not, this is the industry that I think I belong in.
Right. And that's the Picern?
Yeah, that was the Picern Real Estate Group.
Okay.
That became Picern Military Housing, based out of Warwick, Rhode Island at the time.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. All right. Similar to the game-changing question, but and some of what you've already talked about could be deemed a bump in the road, but can you tell us about a time where you had to navigate an unexpected event, either business or personal, and how you got through it?
Sure. Yeah, there are, I think in the world of business and probably in everyone's personal life, there are unexpected events all the time.
Yeah.
Whether it's in relationships with people, your pet gets sick or something, and your child has a problem, or your child doesn't get what they want. But certainly professionally, there are bumps in the road all the time. And in our current, or in my current world, the privatized military housing world, not just a bump in the road, but almost a boulder or a mountain in the road, happened, starting in 2018 with a series of media articles focusing on other private partners and other privatized military operators, not us, about problems in the industry. And by that point, privatized military housing had been in place plus or minus 20 years. I would argue, and I would make the case with anyone, that it's been an overall great success. It has far exceeded everything that the Department of Defense or Congress expected out of the program. It has not just met, but significantly exceeded the benchmarks and metrics that they wanted to see have happened and the improvements in military housing. But there were a series of media articles that were, not untrue, but certainly stilted in a way to I think to exaggerate what the point they were trying to make. And that led to a series of congressional hearings with the House Armed Services Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee. They were televised. They had, a select group of residents from, different, different partners in different projects and different military installations. Again, fortunately, not any that we worked with. They were there. The CEOs of all the 5 or 6 large military partners were all there. And, it was, I had never experienced, other than on TV, a hearing like this. And what I wasn't prepared for was, that whether it's the representatives of Congress or the senators, they know when they have their time and when the floor is theirs. They come in, they talk, they ask their questions, they engage with you. And then when their time is up, they leave, and they leave a staffer there. And so almost every member of the committee, at least in our experience, is only there for when they're speaking and when they're engaging. So they don't get to hear the whole conversation. They don't get to hear what other people say.
They don't want to hear it.
Yeah, well, I think, probably best to always keep politics out of certain discussions. But I agree with that. They had a narrative, in my opinion. They had a narrative and a story they wanted to tell. And
on either side of the aisle, they all sort of act the same way when it comes to those kind of things. So
yeah,
they have their narrative.
Yep,
so they show up for their 5-minute spot where they're supposed to ask questions, but then they talk the whole time, and even if they ask a question, they talk over you while you're trying to answer it.
Yep. So we went through those, and that produced a series of kind of regulatory or congressional oversight requirements in the MHPI, the Military Housing Privatization Initiatives, and they were borne out primarily in the fiscal 2020 National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, in which they were asking, for a tenant bill of rights. Or it's not asking. It was in the legislation, so it became federal law that we would have to provide. So a tenant bill of rights that they essentially drafted. 15 distinct rights for all the MHPI residents, which frankly I would say virtually all, if not all, of the private operators and partners were already providing. I mean, it's basic stuff, but they wanted that mandated. A universal lease. So that if a family moves from, Fort Bragg in North Carolina to, Fort Campbell in Tennessee, when they get the lease, for their home, they've seen it before. It's not something brand new to them. It's not something the private partner developed. It was the one with a 7-year maintenance history.
That's interesting. In our business, we have properties in Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida, and it's like, the lease has to be drafted for the state you're in.
Yep. That's happened with us. So you start with a universal lease that's drafted by the Department of Defense, the United States Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force. Feedback from the private operators and partners, and you come up with the universal lease. But then you have 20 or 30 or however many pages added on to that for the state specific regulations. So, and so what was designed initially to be something fairly straightforward, fairly direct, easy for the family member, the service member, when they permanent change of station, PCS, from location to location, has become something that is just as daunting as it was before at 60 pages, this amendment.
For your basic apartment lease.
That's correct.
And how many times does the state regulations conflict with the DOD?
Honestly, not a lot. I mean, the state regulations are mainly for language that is probably not in the DoD universal lease. So it doesn't really conflict, but it adds on to. They have certain requirements in Tennessee that you don't have in Kentucky, that you don't have in Texas, that you don't have, but you do have in Hawaii, but not New York or Colorado or California. And so you have to, add any state specific language. And some states like California or Colorado or Massachusetts or New York, they're very kind of heavily engaged and with a lot of state landlord tenant requirements and such. Whereas, some of the other states of Texas, Tennessee, and Kentucky, they don't have quite the same level and depth of requirements. So they may be a little more straightforward.
So why the move from Pisern
Pisern
to Win Residential?
A couple of reasons, and some to do with people and some to do with opportunity. So with Pisern, that was a great almost 21 years of my life. I mean, they were, the Pisern family. John Pisern in particular was a gentleman who, always gave me opportunity, always gave me a chance to say, okay, we're doing something different. We need somebody to handle the operations or start up operations or lead operations. Doug, I'd like you to do it. And, like a lot of people, you look back and think, wow, what was he thinking about to give me that opportunity, and thought that I could step up and do that. And so there was a lot of that. But we reached a point where that company was changing a little bit on the military housing side. It had become, John is and was a fantastic entrepreneur and businessman. He is an entrepreneur first. He's a builder of businesses first, and he uses real estate typically, or has used real estate as sort of his canvas, as his muse to do that. But he is much more the developer, the builder of businesses. Let's go over the hill and be the pioneer and do the next thing. And I'm on the operating side, and I saw that he was not leaving, but his attention was getting to what is the next thing, whether it was student housing or some other things. And I really felt that I felt attached to and akin and aligned with the military housing business, what it provides to service members and their families, what we're trying to do for the country in some small way. And I saw that he was kind of moving on, and the heart and soul of that organization in many respects was John and his commitment to all the team members that we had, as well as the residents. And not that was leaving or that was going to change as he kind of focused on other things, but it wasn't quite as present. And I was part of the leadership team there, and I could see between, I was an executive vice president at that time, the other executive vice presidents, the chief operating officer, and I started to feel that the level of passion and the level of, this is a business and it needs to be a successful business, but it has a little bit of a different twist, a little something more to it. I kind of felt and was feared, I guess, that would be moving away, and we'd be getting away from that. And coincidentally, at the time, I knew the wind companies, two people in particular, Bill Wallinger and Patrick Appleby. I'd known them for 10 plus years as I've been working in the military housing business, or probably 15 years at that point, and always made a point to seek them out at industry events or, times that, service meetings or DOD meetings. And we'd always grab a cup of coffee or grab a beer or what have you. And was always impressed with both of them. And as I was looking around thinking, okay, maybe my time at Pisern has moved on, I just started talking with them and kind of let them know. And, Win is and was a larger company in terms of number of installations and projects managed, as well as the number of units managed, the number of people involved. So it was a bigger opportunity for me. And I thought that it would be at that stage of my career, I kind of had a little bit of a heart to heart with myself and some other folks that I talked with, and said, if I don't do this now, if this is something I want to do and I don't do it now, I'm probably not going to do it, because it's going to be all right. At the time, my son was in sixth grade, would be going into seventh grade. I wouldn't want to make a move I'll, have to relocate as he's deep into middle school or certainly in high school. I just wouldn't want to do that to him. I wouldn't want to be separated from him and my family and such. So it kind of came down to if I'm gonna take a chance and do something different and see what the opportunities are outside of where I've been and been, I thought generally successful and frankly comfortable for the last, maybe not the whole 21 years. I guess I wasn't always successful and comfortable there. You have to earn that. It was the time to do it. And so the talks with Win kind of moved on, and, they came to me, I went to them, they came to me, and there was an opportunity there. And I, with the support of my family, I said, this is the thing to do. I'm going to do this. I think is the right thing for me. And it'll be 13 years that I've been here this coming May. So I think it's been a great move for me. I hope Bill Wallinger and Gilbert Wynn and Patrick Appleby, who are all still involved, they all feel the same way about me and my tenure here. But it's been great.
Cool. As an executive, what do you do to stay current and on top of all that you need to know and understand to be a leader and to know what you need to be able to lead your people? How do you stay current?
I think there are a couple of different things there. One, to know all I need to know. I'm not sure I can ever stay on top of that and knowing all that I need to know. Knowing how do I keep current and be able to work with the leadership team and lead the organization. And that's a combination of a couple of things, but mainly it's a lot of listening. It's a lot of listening to the smart people, both inside and outside our organization, that I'm connected with and that I have the opportunity to engage with on a regular basis. I mean, I'm incredibly lucky with the senior leadership team we've put together here on the military housing side. They are a wide-ranging group of extraordinary professionals and high performers of different backgrounds and different perspectives and with different experiences that have brought them to where they are. And I know it's a bit of a cliche, but listening to them, letting them share their thoughts, being open to them, and not just open to them, but seeking out. Tell me where we are with this, because whether it's AI, whether it's more sort of remote or virtual leasing opportunities, or how do we better track change of occupancy maintenance or service orders, because it's in the 39 or so years I've been in the business, it's come a long way from paper spreadsheets or whiteboards that you write on with a dry erase marker to Excel spreadsheets to now you've got wholly sort of interactive and real-time ability to look at data, input data, change schedules, what have you. And I don't think any individual can possibly know all that there is to know and know all about all the resources. But if you're willing to and able to have a group of strong leaders and strong performers with you that have their areas of expertise and their areas of responsibility, they know what they're doing, and they can bring that to you. And they are smart enough, frankly, and broad enough that they can see how every bit of the organization comes together and functions, and how change of occupancy maintenance supports leasing, how leasing is supporting the whole community teams and the customer experience, and how accounting helps everybody make sure that we have the data, whether it's the numbers data or the what have you data, for what we do, whether it's our data analytics and business intelligence team. They can take the data and they can make sure that it's right, it's accurate, and it's to you when you need it. So you have at least some, if not all, of the information you need to make a decision or say, hey, we're off track here. And the ability to do that more and more in real time lets you identify, hey, we're out of cycle here, we're out of sync, we're getting sideways here earlier and earlier, because it's always the earlier you find out anything, the easier it is to correct it, easier it is to get back on path. If you've been going in the wrong direction for 10 miles, it's a hell of a lot harder to get back, to the direction you want to go than if you figure it out after you miss just the first exit. So, I mean, I think that's it. And for me, again, it's listening and and being respectful of others and understanding of others and knowing the value that they bring.
Okay, let's pivot to personal wealth. I always like to hear from our entrepreneurs and successful executives what they do with their own investable cash. And so we're not looking for account numbers or dollar amounts or anything. Mainly what we're looking for is asset classes that you take your own personal savings and what you invest in. Your business is real estate. Does that follow on personally, or do you are you really just a crypto genius? So
Yeah, no, none of those actually. Believe it or not, real estate is not something that is a investable, I guess, passion of mine.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest. I'm a fairly conservative individual, as is my wife, and as is kind of brought up with my dad as a Marine, and my mom, who was the daughter of a banker, and so it's a fairly conservative. So we've been fortunate enough that we've been connected with an investment advisor, an investment firm, since really, probably 30 years now. And they have done a great job in putting us in, whether it's ETFs or mutual funds, but having a look and an understanding that you want to have diversity. You want to have, so much in, you want to be in stocks and securities, but you need, some S&P 500. You want some exposure to growth. You want exposure to, more stable funds, dividend earning funds, international, back here at home. As we get older, you need to, what is that right mix with some fixed income securities, and what do they look like? And frankly, how long do you think you're going to work? How long do you think you're going to live? Because we don't, I guess one of our tenets is that we have one son, and we don't want to be a burden on him as we get older. So what do we need to do now to ensure that in 5 years or 6 years or however many years when I stop working and retire, and I certainly won't retire till I have a hobby, because I don't really have any hobbies right now. So
be surprised.
Yeah,
you might join the senior golf tour. So.
I could, but we don't want to be a burden on him,
right?
And that's, we've been fortunate enough that hasn't, we've been lucky that our parents could sort of had a similar perspective, and we want to put him through school and let him get on his way without the burden of student debt, so he can figure out what he wants to do and not have to do something that's going to, I got to do this because I have my next student, loan payment due. And so that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of the outlook. It's sort of steady as she goes, max out the 401k, put other funds aside every year, figure out what that needs to be, so that you have what you think, the retirement savings and the cash you're going to live on come, when you're 65, 66, 67, whatever it might be, that it's there. And that in some cases that means you save today so you can spend tomorrow, versus I'll spend today and I'll figure out how to save tomorrow, because when it comes to saving, tomorrow never comes. If you don't, at least in my perspective, and I know me well enough, if I don't do it now, I'm not going to do it tomorrow.
All right, last question. Doug, if you were mentoring someone, or somebody just wanted to follow in your footsteps, what one piece of advice would you give them?
Just one piece of advice is
that's the tough part of the question.
That's tricky. I guess I probably have two, and they're broad and they're.
I'll allow it.
Thank you, Your Honor. They're kind of pithy, but one is plan your work and then work your plan. Have a plan, have an idea. Don't go into anything blind. Don't go into, I'll jump in there and see what happens. Think it through, have some idea to know what to expect, what to anticipate, because as hard as you plan to prepare and anticipate, you're going to get sideways. Something's going to happen you didn't expect. So plan your work your plan so that when something unexpected happens, you can deal with the unexpected. You don't have to deal with the whole broad, aspect of what you're trying to do. So, I mean, I've always taken the time to figure out, okay, here's what we're going to do this week. Here's what we're going to do next week. Here are our objectives for this quarter or next year, or where do we want to be in 5 years? Plan it out and figure out what you need to do and gather the resources. And I don't know if it's a second piece or it's just sort of an add-on or a carry-on from that. And this is something that a friend of my oldest brothers said back when they were in college together. And it's always struck me. And it was, don't panic, adjust. Because panic will just be a waste of energy. And panic isn't going to get you there. Adjust. And that doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean it's simple. Again, as I said, it's pithy and it sounds simple. But when you're in the heat of the moment, heat of the battle, it's not nearly that easy. But adjust. Because whether no matter how long you live, nothing is going to go exactly according to your plan. You're going to get hit with speed bumps and obstacles and things you didn't see coming. And if you panic every time, you'll spin your wheels and you'll never move forward.
Agree. And I think it's sage advice for this week. And for anybody who's
Yes.
got money in the public markets. And I mean, and I've got some, but you and I are similar ages, but we've seen this happen, dozens of times, and panicking is a waste of time. Just on the face of it, and then experience tells you that the market comes down like this, and in about 90 days it'll be higher than it was before it crashed. So
it could very well be, and it's So you don't want to panic. Although if this week is any indication, I'll probably be working a lot longer than 5 or 6 years to make sure everything.
Yeah, but you'll have a different answer to that at the end of the month than
that's true. That's
true. Because these things, that's just sort of the travails of investing in the public markets. So that's the price you pay for liquidity.
Yep.
So
for sure.
So anyway, thank you for taking your time and sharing your experiences and sage wisdom. Doug, if anybody in the audience would like to reach out and communicate with you, how would they do that?
I'd be happy to hear from anybody. My email address is djones@winco, winco.com. And if you want to reach out to me that way and we start a conversation, I can be happy to provide my cell phone number, and we don't have to do it all by email, but that may be a good place to start.
Great. Well, it's very generous of you. We'll make sure your email and your LinkedIn profile are in the show notes to make it easy for people to just click and reach out. And once again, thanks for carving out your time. You've got that big EVP label. And I know you don't have any time, so we appreciate you sharing yours with us. So, and to our audience, thanks for watching this edition of the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity podcast. Please be sure to check us out our next episode and leave us some reviews and tell us what you think. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity podcast. If you'd like to be a guest, visit growthgraceprosperity.com/guest. We'd love to hear your story.